Nigeria's Senate will reconvene on Tuesday, and it is expected that top of their agenda should be approving the appointment of service chiefs recently made by President Tinubu, and then subsequently screening and approving the president's ministerial nominees. Before the 10th National Assembly was sworn in, the speculation and politicking was rife on who would emerge at the top of the assembly. But with that handled, the attention has swung squarely to those who would make up the president's cabinet. Nigeria's constitution provides for at least one cabinet member or minister from each of the 36 states in the country, although the number of ministries and ministers has not been the same in recent times. And to ensure representation from each state, a minister is often assisted by one or more ministers of state. Joining me in the studio is Austin Ogana, publisher of the Will newspaper. And joining via Zoom is Olusesan Okunade, public affairs analyst. Gentlemen, welcome to Politics HQ. So I think I'll start with you, but it's a question for the two of you, and I think it's a very general question that we can all start off. So Austin, because you're right here with me, let me start with you. We're just a couple days, over a month into President Tinubu's presidency. Did you think it would take so long for us to get this ministerial list out?
Thank you again for having me. I think this is probably one of the fastest we've had in modern times. I recall the last administration, it took President Buhari probably around 6 months to name his cabinet. President Tinubu is probably just about 5 weeks into his administration, and I believe he's moved really fast. And I think it's the pace that he's moved on that is pouring the anxiety. And if I'm to say correctly, I think that you know, his ministerial appointees are probably going to be known in a couple of days, if not even
Tomorrow, maybe.
Maybe tomorrow, because we understand that a lot of work has been done, you know, around it. But the challenge is that, you know, there's so much secrecy around it. We're not getting the kind of information that would usually get, you know, on an average day. So. But we're watching. I'm sure Nigerians are eager to know those who would probably be on the list. I mean, we have some snippets here and there.
And you're going to share them. Just hold on to the snippets. I want Olusesan to join us now. In terms of this ministerial list, Austin is saying this is probably going to be one of the fastest in recent times. Many people remember the conversation or the difficulty that President Buhari seemed to have in, of course, announcing his ministerial list. But 5 weeks plus 6 weeks in, we don't have that list yet, but the reports are, final checks are being done by the DSS and such. So, Olusesan, too long? Were you expecting it to run about this time? Let's just quickly get that out of the way.
Yeah, well, I think I'll go in line with Austin.
I think you're muted. Can you please check your audio, Olusesan?
Yeah, I'm not muted. I don't know if you can hear me.
Can hear you now. Fantastic.
Okay, thank you very much. I said I think I will allude to the fact that Austin took it out of my mouth to say this seems to be pretty fast. And the reason why all of us are full of expectation is if you look at the manner at which the current President Bola Tinubu picked the advisors and seems to be hitting the ground running. Everyone is really asking, where are the ministerial list? And you know, within the context of the Constitution, he has like 60 days to work around this. And I can tell you, I'm very optimistic, just like Austin too. I've just said that possibly once the National Assembly resumes their sitting tomorrow, we might start seeing, you know, interview or, you know, interaction with this list. We are all aware that they have actually undergone this training expected of them with the respective agency, the DSS and the like. So hopefully, if not by the end of this week, by next week, at worst, before end of next week, we should have the list. But one thing you can be sure of is the president has.
All right, I think we're having a bit of a technical glitch there with Olusesan. He'll come back to us quickly. But if we're looking at all the media reports of the visitors list, the rotating door that happens to be Aso Rock right now. Austin, let's get to that because your paper, The Will, has some stories on who might supposedly be emerging at the top of these lists or even making their way onto the list. This is a list that's meant to have 36 men and women from across Nigeria representing each state. So who are we looking at? Because the reports are some of the names are not new, they're not unexpected, they may not even necessarily be technocrats, that this is looking like a real politicking list that might emerge.
I've spoken to a lot of people who think, and I think I subscribe to that idea as well, that this administration should actually depart from the norm and, appoint people of competence that are pretty young, people in their
What does pretty young mean?
in their early 40s.
Okay.
Yeah, people in their 40s, late 40s, early 50s. But apparently what we're seeing, people, what we're hearing and sampling, nominees, probable nominees, they'll probably be in their 60s and very late 50s. We reported that Rabiu Kwakwanso, who happened to be the presidential candidate of the NNPP from Kano, is being offered a ministerial position. We're certain about that, but until it's made public, we'll just go with a little bit of skepticism.
So is that a situation of drawing a potential competitor or not a stumbling block, but an opposition closer to you?
Yeah, so I'll call it a government. I call it a government of national interest.
Not unity.
No, considering that these are a couple of interests, that are entrenched around the country. So we believe, like we said in the report that we did, that President Tinubu is actually looking beyond the 2023 presidential election and strategizing ahead of the 2027 because Rabiu Kwakwanso showed strength in the last election and understanding that his political journey, actually started from the PDP.
Yeah.
Leaving him out there, hanging may just be a problem for
Scoop him up before maybe the opposition
for the president that's looking beyond 2027 as well. So we think that's why he's met twice with Kwakwanso, which is quite strange for you to meet an opposition leader like that. So we think that's why he's been considered. We also know that for Osun State, for instance, Governor Oyetola, who was defeated by Adeleke, is virtually the leader of the party in the state. And there's this norm in the politics that will play that the winner takes it, the opposition becomes the leader of the opposition in that state. So naturally, Oyetola should be the nominee for Osun State. And then for Lagos, Lagos is interesting because today some names came up with threw us off guard. But we still believe that Yemi Cardoso will eventually emerge in Lagos because if you understand how Tinubu plays his game, you understand that with this administration, we believe he's rewarding those that worked with him at some point that he didn't reward.
And Cardoso is a close.
Yes, and Cardoso, you have Dele Alake,
Yes.
who wasn't
Who's
rewarded
now special
before,
advisor.
who's now special advisor. You have Wale Edu,
Also special advisor, but
who's
possibly
possibly either going, well, there's a debate.
finance or CBN.
CBN, there's a debate about that. And then you now have Yemi Cardoso, who was also active in that administration.
Okay, I'll come back to the names because there's something behind the names that we haven't mentioned yet. But Olusegun, you've heard some of these names that Austin has shared here. Kwakwanso, leader of the NNPP, also had a good showing, if you would say that, with the 2023 elections. Oyetola, former governor of Osun State, as well as possibly Yemi Cardoso from here in Lagos State. When we see these names, just 3 out of possible 36, many more that have been bandied about, do you think this is about politicking or about national unity? Austin has said he believes it's national interest above national unity or even national progress. Let me add that as well.
Yeah, I think I'll go the route of saying more of national interest with the crop of the list that we are speculating about. And one thing you should give to our president Bola Tinubu is discovery of young people who are majorly technocrats and who have understanding of delivering at every point in time. If you look at the special advisor on revenue is a guy in his 40s. And if you look while he was out here in Lagos, some of the names we may be looking out now were some of his discovery. So I want to believe that some of those ones may not even be used 100%, but you'll be shocked that there are some discoveries that he would have seen. I may not really be talking about it, but one thing I know about the president is that he considered the youth in every of his appointments since I know him, and give room for women. So you might see some of a surprise name that you've not heard of, but when you go about and read about them, about their bio, you know definitely that they are the right pegs that he has actually picked for the right hole. So for me, it won't be any surprises when we see the names, because we know that it's a discovery of new talent that he galvanized together to have delivery in every area. While he was governor in Lagos, he did that. While he was leader of the party, he was able to do that. I'm sure most of us never know who Fashola was until he brought him on board. We only know him as the chief of staff. How did he even identify him then as the chief of staff? So these are surprises that you always see the president come up with, and it's majorly young. So don't be surprised when we start saying people possibly at least having about 3 or 4 that will be in their early 40s. If you are not even having late 30s, then the other people in their late 40s and 50s. But
Okay.
I'm sure that we'll have the right personnel manning the right ministry to deliver some of the promises that the president has actually given to the public.
And there's also a Fashola question as well, but I'll come back to that. So Austin, I'm back to you now, because we can see some people who are finding themselves on the list due to their own, I'll use the word loosely, merits, because of something maybe the president believes they can deliver. But there are also those who might be getting names put on the list because there are strings attached, because, to use the term we use in Nigeria, there are godfathers at play. Yeah. Who else do you think, aside from the names that seem to have made it to the list, who else do you think might be pulling some strings to put some names on the list?
You see, understanding how politics is played in this country and how appointments are made, there are hardly appointment that you don't have people behind pushing for people. That's how it works. So to ask me to speak specifically about that, and I'll probably have to go deep down into my archives to probably name 1 or 2 people. But what I can say really is that understanding, there's something I want to bring up. Understanding, going back to, I think it was 2011, ACN, it was Nuhu Ribadu and Fola Adiola. They won the ticket for the ACN at that time. And they will understanding the politics that played out at that time. Jonathan won the election because the Southwest supported him. The ACN supported him. So technically, Tinubu threw Nuhu Ribadu and Fola Adiola under the bus for Jonathan. And I believe they stuck by him. And today,
he's now
Nuhu is being rewarded
as National Security Advisor.
As National Security Advisor. So I also believe that Fola Adiola from Ogun State may actually be one of the nominees. You know, so I just thought about this today, and I did a little bit of research, and I thought I mentioned that. But however, looking at the dynamics, you know, we expect a very interesting and unusual cabinet. I say this because we shouldn't be surprised if we have Nyesom Wike, the governor of Rivers State, is someone that is being tipped to be in the cabinet.
And he's also visited the president.
Yes. Now, we don't know if he's going to remain in the PDP or switch to the APC. So those are the dynamics we're looking at.
Play.
Yes, those are dynamics at play. And then I've mentioned, of course, the NNPP guy in the north. So we'll see in this administration, we'll see a blend of interest and politics like we've never seen it before, considering that the Tinubu that we know is a very deft politician, and he will do everything within his political skills, to ensure that he stays in office and probably wins in 2027.
Okay. So, Olusegun, I saw your reaction earlier when I brought up Babatunde Fashola, and that's a name that many Nigerians have bandied about when it comes to the president's possible ministers. And of course, former governor of Lagos State served with the Buhari administration, had a full plate the first time round, and that plate seemed to get just a bit lighter. But there are some who think he could possibly make a reemergence again on this ministerial list, and others who say, let this man go and rest. But many people believe he still has a lot to give to Nigeria. So if we're saying that we may not see him on this ministerial list, where do you think we see a Fashola, who seems to be, I think, possibly a linchpin, maybe, for this administration, or the potential of what the administration could be?
It's the qualities and the potentials embedded in Babatunde Raji Fashola. But for me, personal, I would rather want him to walk behind the scene. During the election, he coordinated the situation room, and you can give him the kudos for the delivery of what he did. I would rather want him to act behind the scene, coordinating and possibly giving certain reports rather than seeing him to be part of the minister's list that I was saying. And let me state this, that outside the ministers, you see, the board of agencies too are very strategic, and that is another area we should look out for, where you have competent ends that can deliver to point. Take, for example, agencies like FRS, which is meant for revenue generation. Don't forget that there is this discussion of harmonizing the custom, the FRS, and the revenue agency just to be one, while we have several directorates. So you expect that you have someone who have understanding in the area of revenue generation. But for me, talking about Fashola, I would prefer him to work behind the scene, and possibly maybe in 2027, if Baba is not recontesting, we can consider him maybe from this side as a vice president to deliver it. But for me, I won't want them to he has really worked in the last 8 years. He's the first minister to have 3 cabinets, strong, cabinet to himself, which one was taken out of his portfolio in the second term. I think he should just stay back, work behind the scene, and coordinate activity with the experience that he's possessed of.
Okay, so Austin, has Fashola's name come up?
That's a tricky one, because I don't see how Fashola emerges in Lagos. Understanding that each state, there are 36 states, plus the FCT, that's 37. And then you have to go around the 6 geopolitical zones to pick one person. With what I know and with what I've heard, I understand that there are plans to dissolve the National Working Committee of the party, and I believe that at least 2 persons are going to be ministers from there. And I might hear that there's a chance that Omishori, who happens
Adams.
to be...
Mishori,
Yolo Mishori.
Yes, Yolo Mishori.
Yeah, the national secretary of the party.
Interesting.
Will probably be on the list. And if that happens, I see him occupying, representing the southwest zone. So I don't see how Fashola emerges. You're considering that, I don't know what else they're going to give to Fashola. And Fashola has said that he's tired.
He's tired.
I mean, he's had 3 portfolios.
If you look at his picture from 8 years ago and now, you can see it.
He'll tell you he's tired.
Yeah.
I've asked him personally, and he's told me that he's tired. He would like to take a break for at least 4 years. So he's tired. I don't see how he emerges, as a minister in this administration.
So let's come back to this 36 ministers plus 1 with the FCT. For the long time, it's been a very big conversation, because when you look at ministers and you look at ministers of state, you look at their portfolios, there have been conversations about round pegs and square holes, not fitting people to where they can do their best work. Yeah. Some people simply not even being technocrats that should be in certain positions. You've talked about us seeing a very diverse and unusual cabinet when this list eventually comes out. But is it not time yet for Nigeria to have a conversation about whether or not the country even needs 36 ministers? We do not have 36 ministries.
Yeah, but it's a constitutional requirement.
Constitutions can be amended.
Yeah, but it can't be amended overnight.
No, but are we working towards a conversation?
We need to understand that Nigeria is a very complex country to govern. Yes, there's need to cut, federal spending.
Cost of governance.
Yes, but, with at least 200 million people, you need a big cabinet. I mean, not an extra large cabinet, but I think 36, 38
is relative.
40 is fine, because every state needs to have a representative at the center. How do you do that? So how do you tell, say you cut the cabinet down to 20, so how do you tell a state like Delta or a state like Rivers that it would not have a representative at the center? So I think the framers of the Constitution put that into play. I particularly don't see any issues with having 42 member cabinet, as long as they're effective and as long as they cut waste and as long as they do everything that needs to be done. Because we need to understand that one key driver of any economy in the world, even the United States of America, is the U.S. government. The U.S. government is the largest employer of labor and probably the biggest, contractor, awarders out there. Government is there to spend money. Government is there to
make things go round.
To make things go round, stimulate the economy. So if you have a 42-man cabinet, and the federal government is well oiled in terms of good revenues and what have you, I really don't see any reason why we should not even have a 50-man cabinet. As long as they're effective, as long as the Minister for Health is doing what he needs to do, the Minister for Commerce doing what he needs to do, the Minister for Transport, if they're all effective, it's even good for the Nigerian people, because you now have different people manning different parts of the economy. The stress is less on them, and the stress is even less on the people.
So I'll come to you, Olusegun.
Yeah.
Austin is talking about effectiveness, cutting of waste. We know how Nigerians feel about cost of governance, how Nigerians feel about the National Assembly and how much it takes for us to pay for the National Assembly and the budget of the National Assembly. And here we are still talking about 36 ministers plus one, as I'll say, 37 for the FCT. When we look at how much Nigeria is spending, again, we have a debt servicing problem. Some might say it's a GDP, it's a debt to GDP ratio versus a revenue to GDP ratio. Whatever it is, we are top heavy. We can all see that. So when we have a conversation about ministerial lists, about 36 ministers, there's no way a conversation about do we need 36 ministers won't come up. Where do you stand?
Yeah, I stand with Austin. Sincerely speaking, aside looking at the cost, these are the people that are going to do the work to actually raise the revenue. And if you have the right set of people who have understanding of the ministry that they are handling, what you'll get on the long run is to get dividend for some of those challenges that you're actually saying. You see, for some of us in the finance world, they will tell you that if you need to raise your revenue and the major people that you require to work are the human capital, if you don't get the required numbers that is expected of you, you might be faced with challenges of overstretching them and not getting the best out of them. And if you look at you managing the crisis, if you reduce it and there is no representative from a state to the federal level, it becomes a problem. And that cost on its own, you might not be able to accommodate it when they start creating unrest for not having a representative. So you going by saying that let's amend the constitution to actually, accommodate reduction in it. I think when we are between 42 and 45, it's really not too much. What is expected of them is delivery, having understanding of what they are called to do, and people having dividend of what we call democracy at the shortest possible time. Take, for example, having somebody who have understanding of power sector, and you are able to give us 24 power supply. What that will translate to is that majority of the people who are maybe called artisans that are doing other work that is not expected, that is not befitting onto them, killing the creativity in them, will get back to their work on the, in their locality. They offer that which is expected of them, and you see, even it will affect education, it will affect other sectors. So when you have the right person too in the Ministry of Transport, who is able to annex all the arms of transportation, talked about the rail, the road, the air, and even the pipeline, where we can discontinue the issue of trucks on the road and we make use of pipeline. It's under the Ministry of Transportation. So when you have the right people manning, the ministry, I can tell you that you'll come out to say that 42 is not enough. But the area we need to watch is how many people are you having under you as a minister. Don't start having so many SAs, that aides definitely be reporting to you on things that maybe one or two people can do. They can cut the cost in that area, but for the ministers, I think we can still make do with the 42 to 45, taking into cognizance the interest of every state so that there will not be anything like unrest. But when you have unrest and people start distracting you, that is cost on its own that you might not be able to account for easily.
Okay, so before we wrap things up, Austin, okay, please,
What
very
he
quickly.
just said. I think the problem we have in this country really is revenue generation. We're not generating enough revenue, which makes it so hard for us to, to run the country and finance our debt. So I just felt I should just throw it in.
Okay, so I'm coming back to you because there's maybe not a complication, but an interesting angle to this whole conversation around ministerial nominees. And that happens to be with APC state chapters that don't have APC governors in place. So very quickly, what kind of interesting dynamic could that create? Or is that creating? Because many people are saying this list is quite ready already.
You see, it's interesting how it works. Like I just told you. So for every state that the APC lost the governorship election,
They're compensating the governor.
naturally, the candidate of the party becomes the leader. Because if the party had won in that state, naturally, that candidate or the governor would be the leader. So it's quite easy to navigate. In my home state, Delta, for instance, we expect that Ovioma Agege, the candidate of the party who lost in that election, will naturally be the leader of the party, except Abuja says otherwise. So it's easy for for the party in those states, to rally around
One person, a central figure.
he's now the central figure, except in states where, I understand that Delta has a bit of a friction, but so far they've managed to, to keep it together. In Edo State as well, they have a little bit of friction, but somehow they managed to keep it together. So in states where the APC is the opposition, naturally the governorship candidate of the party should naturally be the leader.
All right. So final question takes us to the law that former president, now Muhammadu Buhari, signed before he left office, which gave the president and governors 60 days after assuming office to name their cabinet. And so this means that President Bola Tinubu could actually keep Nigerians on the titterhooks for another month or so if he wished, but it's very likely not going to happen. But at the end of the day, I think some were asking the necessity of this law and then the sincerity of the law that comes from an administration that seemingly struggled to put together its own cabinet. Olusegun, it's on the books. It is what it is, giving 60 days to the president and the governor. Was this law really necessary? Have we gotten to a point where we need to legislate when governors and presidents actually put their cabinets forward for confirmation?
Yeah, I think the law to me is necessary because when you don't have laws guiding certain things, people tend to just possibly abuse, that particular opportunity. I'm sure the man that signed this into law took him 6 months. If now that we now have a law guiding or legislated that can guide the current administration, it will speed up things. Because I'm sure he went back to check through that the delay in appointing those ministers actually affected a lot of things. And it will be pretty well that those things are actually put to plate within the necessary time. 60 days is really not bad for me because out of the 48 months, you now have like 46 months to put yourself together and make things happen. But it's good that we have such laws to guide us so that we can act accordingly. You see, part of the things we keep telling individuals is that when you are vouching for position like this, either as governor or as president, you must be fully prepared. You start the work not even a year or two to that period. It's something you must have been, cherry picking and working
And
with
tilling
certain
the
people.
ground.
The guy, when you get the post, not you're getting the post and you are just stranded, not fully prepared. That we have seen in this president that is actually prepared even for the work ahead of him with some of the appointments that he has been making. And we are very optimistic and hopeful that he will give that. But going by that question, I think it's good we have the law at least to guide us so that we can hit the ground running. That if someone can take 6 months, who knows whether the administration after this will be taking 1 year? Because if there is no law, you just tell everyone that you are taking your time to get the best of it. But when you know that this is something you need to face when you get to position, you start preparing yourself. Whether you win or you lose the position, you must have been preparing yourself to make sure that those things are actually by the side to
And
make
ready to
things
go.
happen.
All right. Austin, because of time, I'll need your response to that in 1 minute. Did we really need a law for all of this?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, look at what former President Buhari did, 6 months.
And that was possibly precedent setting.
Yes, absolutely. Then one day you probably have a president that will come in and go. When you had state governors that have governed for 7, 8 months without a cabinet, I mean, it's surprising that people come into office without preparation, without even understanding that they need to come in. I mean, if I'm elected and I come into office, I'll come in with a few people that I'm ready to appoint as commissioners or ministers right away. I don't know why there's so much politics. You won elections a month, 2 months ago. The day you're sworn in, you should enter office with a few cabinet members.
A few good men and women
a few good
behind
men
you.
and women, so that you hit the ground running. And then as you progress, you're picking people to block or to plug different holes. So I think the law is good for Nigeria because our politicians actually take the piss. So it's good to check them with laws like that.
All right. Gentlemen, we'll have to leave it at that for now because we need to go on a quick break. Austin Ghana, publisher of the Will newspaper, as well as Olusegun Okwade, public affairs analyst. Thank you so much for joining me. We hope to have more information for you with who is on that list in the coming days. But for now, Politics HQ is taking a break.